Stop everything and listen to this nightmare. A 32-year-old mother and her 2-year-old son wake up every morning at dawn with a mission that should warm every American heart. They turn their driveway into a canvas of hope, creating beautiful chalk, art with inspirational messages designed to make neighbors smile and spread positivity through their community. Sea creatures, flowers, whimsical drawings, and uplifting quotes that brighten everyone's day and cost absolutely nothing except time, love, and creativity. Just 5 days into this heartwarming routine that was bringing joy to an entire neighborhood, her HOA received a complaint from a neighbor who called her art tacky. Not dangerous, not harmful, not offensive, tacky. Now this mother faces fines and violations for the unforgivable crime of making people happy. She must wash away her beautiful artwork every single night or face escalating punishment from the corporate machine that controls her neighborhood. This is the true story of Mackenzie from Alabama, a woman whose simple acts of creativity and kindness have exposed the soul-crushing reality of HOA control in America. Her battle isn't just about chalk on driveways. It's about whether joy, creativity, and community spirit can survive in corporate-controlled neighborhoods that treat human happiness as a violation of property management efficiency. Do not look away. This story will shatter everything you thought you knew about the war being waged against basic human joy in American communities. Mackenzie never set out to become a revolutionary or challenge any system. She's just a 32-year-old mother of 3 living in Alabama who discovered something magical during the isolation and stress of modern life, turning her driveway into a daily canvas of hope and creativity with her 2-year-old son. What started as a simple bonding activity between mother and child evolved into something beautiful that would touch hearts across America and ultimately expose the dark heart of HOA control. I love drawing sea creatures, florals, and little whimsical pieces, but the main thread through all of it is positivity, Mackenzie explains with the genuine warmth of someone who understands that small acts of kindness can change the world. Every morning I try to put down an inspirational or funny quote, something that might make a neighbor smile on their morning walk or scroll on TikTok. The routine began organically, as the best things often do. Mackenzie and her toddler would wake up early, grab their colorful chalk, and spend precious morning moments together creating art that would disappear with the next rain, but live forever in the memories of everyone who saw it. The driveway became their shared canvas, a place where imagination had no limits and creativity flowed as naturally as breathing. After posting a TikTok video featuring their colorful drawings and motivational quotes that unexpectedly went viral, Mackenzie decided to make this daily practice a permanent part of their lives and continue sharing it online. The response was overwhelming and heartwarming. Thousands of people commented about how the simple videos brightened their days, inspired their own creativity, and reminded them that beauty and kindness still exist in the world. For Mackenzie, this wasn't about social media fame or attention. It was about the pure joy she saw on her son's face as they created together, the neighbors who stopped to read the inspiring messages, and the simple truth that spreading positivity costs nothing but creates immeasurable value. She had found a way to make the world a little brighter, one chalk drawing at a time. The art itself was innocent and beautiful. Sea creatures swimming across concrete, flowers blooming in impossible colors, whimsical characters that seemed to dance on the driveway surface. Each piece was accompanied by carefully chosen inspirational quotes designed to uplift anyone who saw them. Choose joy. Be kind. You are loved. Today is beautiful. Simple messages that reminded people of their humanity and potential. But Mackenzie lives in an HOA community where beauty, joy, and human creativity are subject to corporate approval and neighbor surveillance, where inspiring others can be classified as a violation, where making people smile can result in fines and punishment. She was about to discover that in modern America, even the most innocent acts of creativity and kindness can be transformed into crimes against property management efficiency. Just 5 days into Mackenzie's heartwarming routine of spreading daily positivity through chalk art, the corporate machinery that controls her neighborhood swung into action with the efficiency of a surveillance state. In early July 2025, she received an email from her Homeowners Association that would transform her innocent family activity into a case study of everything wrong with corporate control of American communities. The email was cold, official, and devastating in its corporate precision. Her HOA had received a complaint from a neighbor about her chalk art, not a complaint about noise, safety, or anything that actually affected anyone's well-being. A complaint that her beautiful, inspirational artwork was tacky and violated community guidelines. Someone in her neighborhood had looked at drawings of sea creatures and flowers accompanied by messages of hope and kindness and decided that this outbreak of joy needed to be stopped immediately. The HOA's response revealed the true nature of corporate control over human expression. Rather than investigating whether the complaint had merit, rather than considering the positive impact of Mackenzie's art on community morale, rather than recognizing that chalk art is temporary and harmless, they immediately sided with the complaining neighbor and imposed new restrictions designed to crush creativity and community spirit. The new rule was as arbitrary as it was cruel. Mackenzie must wash away her artwork every single night by 10 p.m. or face escalating fines and violations. Think about what this means. A mother and her 2-year-old child could spend their morning creating something beautiful that brought joy to everyone who saw it, only to be forced to destroy it hours later to satisfy the aesthetic preferences of one complaining neighbor and the corporate entity that prioritizes compliance over community. This wasn't about property values or legitimate community standards. Rain would wash the chalk art away naturally within hours or days, leaving no permanent impact on anyone's property. The art was confined to Mackenzie's own driveway, not spreading into common areas or affecting anyone else's space. The messages were universally positive and family-friendly, designed to inspire rather than offend. There was literally no rational justification for the restriction beyond the raw exercise of corporate power over human creativity. The 10 p.m. deadline was particularly revealing about the corporate mindset behind the rule. It wasn't enough to limit the art. It had to be actively destroyed every single night, ensuring that no trace of unauthorized joy could survive into the next day. The HOA was essentially demanding that Mackenzie participate in the daily destruction of her own creativity, forcing her to erase her child's artwork as a demonstration of submission to corporate authority. But here's what makes Mackenzie's story so inspiring and fundamentally American. Instead of submitting to the corporate demand to stop creating, instead of allowing the HOA to crush her family's joy, she found a creative way around their restrictions that would turn her persecution into a powerful statement about the resilience of human creativity in the face of corporate oppression. Smash that like button. If this corporate attack on creativity is making your blood boil, the next chapter shows how Mackenzie fought back. While one neighbor's complaint initiated Mackenzie's persecution by the HOA, the overwhelming community response that followed proved that corporate authority and individual pettiness can never truly defeat the human spirit when people decide to stand together against injustice. What happened next should inspire every American who believes in the power of communities to protect their own against corporate overreach. Despite the one negative response that triggered HOA intervention, Mackenzie has received an overwhelmingly positive reaction from both her immediate community and people across the country who have discovered her story through social media. The response has been so supportive and heartwarming that it has restored her faith in human nature and demonstrated that one person's negativity truly doesn't speak for an entire community's values. People have left me chalk, knee pads, and sweet notes. A neighbor even put a little cushion on my driveway for me to sit on, Mackenzie reveals with obvious emotion and gratitude. It's shown me just how kind people really can be, and how one person's negativity doesn't speak for the whole community. This outpouring of support represents everything beautiful about human nature and community solidarity in the face of corporate oppression. Think about what these gestures mean. Neighbors who appreciated Mackenzie's daily artwork didn't just express support verbally, they took concrete action to help her continue creating despite HOA restrictions. Someone bought chalk and delivered it to her home, understanding that daily art creation would require more supplies than originally planned. Another neighbor provided knee pads, recognizing that the forced daily recreation would be physically demanding for someone spending extended time kneeling on concrete. The sweet notes left by community members represent something even more precious than material support. They demonstrate that Mackenzie's art was genuinely touching people's lives and making a difference in their daily experiences. In a world where people often feel isolated and disconnected, her simple messages of hope and beautiful drawings were creating real human connections and brightening people's days in measurable ways. Most touching of all, a neighbor put a little cushion on her driveway to make her morning creative sessions more comfortable. This gesture reveals the depth of community care and the understanding that Mackenzie's fight had become everyone's fight. People weren't just supporting her right to create art. They were actively participating in making that creation easier and more sustainable despite corporate attempts to make it difficult. The community response extends far beyond her immediate neighborhood. Online supporters have shared her story thousands of times, creating a viral movement of people who understand that this fight is about more than chalk art. Comments and messages pour in from parents who want their children to live in communities where creativity is celebrated rather than punished, from artists who recognize the broader implications for creative expression, and from Americans who are tired of corporate control over the most basic human activities. This grassroots support has given Mackenzie the strength and motivation to continue her daily creative practice, despite the additional burden imposed by HOA restrictions. Knowing that people care about her fight and value what she's creating makes the early mornings and daily artwork recreation worthwhile. She's not just creating art anymore. She's leading a movement of people who refuse to let corporate authority crush community spirit and human creativity. The contrast between the community's response and the HOA's response reveals everything wrong with corporate neighborhood control. While actual neighbors show kindness, support, and appreciation for creativity that enhances community life, the corporate entity treats the same activity as a violation that must be controlled and ultimately eliminated. Mackenzie's persecution for chalk art isn't an isolated incident perpetrated by one particularly hostile HOA. It's part of a disturbing nationwide pattern of corporate attacks on childhood activities, family traditions, and creative expression that reveals how completely American communities have been captured by entities that view human joy as a threat to property management efficiency. Across the country, similar stories emerge with frightening regularity. In Denver's Stapleton neighborhood, a 3-year-old girl named Emerson Cohen was banned from drawing flowers and hearts with colored chalk on sidewalks in shared areas between houses because her innocent artwork offended or disturbed at least one neighbor who demanded HOA intervention. The association's attorney told media that they were trying to do no harm and prevent the sidewalk art, as if a toddler's chalk flowers represented some kind of community threat requiring corporate intervention. In Birmingham, Alabama, a young girl named Kennedy spent an hour carefully drawing "Love Your Neighbor" in front of her family's home, only to receive a formal violation letter from the River Chase Townhomes Owners Association calling her inspirational message unsightly and demanding its immediate removal. The irony was lost on no one except the HOA board. They were forcing the removal of artwork that literally encouraged loving your neighbors, demonstrating that corporate control had completely replaced basic human values in neighborhood governance. These incidents reveal a systematic pattern of HOA attacks on activities that should be celebrated as examples of community engagement, childhood development, and family bonding. Chalk art represents everything positive about residential neighborhoods: children using their creativity, families spending time together outdoors, temporary beauty that harms no one and brings joy to everyone who sees it. Yet corporate management entities consistently treat these activities as violations requiring enforcement action. The psychological impact on children caught in these corporate crackdowns cannot be overstated. Children who believed they were contributing something positive to their communities suddenly learn that their creativity is unwelcome, their artistic expression is classified as a violation, and their innocent attempts to beautify their neighborhoods are treated as crimes against property management standards. These experiences teach children that corporate authority matters more than human expression, and that community spaces are controlled by entities that view childhood joy as a problem to be solved. Parents like Mackenzie find themselves in impossible positions, forced to choose between protecting their children's creativity and avoiding corporate punishment that could affect their family's housing security. The emotional toll of explaining to a 2-year-old why their beautiful artwork must be washed away every night, why their innocent creativity is considered tacky by anonymous neighbors, and why corporate rules matter more than community joy creates trauma that extends far beyond the immediate families involved. The targeting of chalk art is particularly revealing because it represents the complete absence of proportionality in HOA enforcement. Chalk art is temporary, harmless, confined to private property, and universally positive in its impact on community morale. There is literally no rational justification for restricting it beyond the raw exercise of corporate power over human expression. When organizations ban chalk art, they're admitting that they view human happiness itself as a threat to their control. The legal framework that enables these attacks on childhood creativity reveals fundamental problems with how Americans have allowed private corporations to acquire governmental powers without constitutional limitations. If a city government banned children from drawing with chalk on their own driveways, it would face immediate legal challenges based on First Amendment protections for artistic expression. But when private HOAs impose identical restrictions, those constitutional protections simply don't apply, creating a legal vacuum where corporate entities can restrict human expression with impunity. Understanding why HOAs systematically attack activities like chalk art that bring obvious benefits to communities requires examining the corporate psychology that has replaced human judgment in neighborhood governance. The transformation of community management from neighbor-helping neighbor cooperation to corporate profit extraction has created a mindset that views human spontaneity, creativity, and joy as threats to efficient property management rather than assets that enhance community life. From a corporate management perspective, activities like chalk art represent several types of problems that need to be controlled or eliminated. First, they demonstrate that residents can create beauty and community connection without corporate oversight or approval, undermining the narrative that professional management is necessary for neighborhood quality. When a mother and her child can improve community morale with chalk and creativity, it raises uncomfortable questions about what value expensive management companies actually provide. Second, creative activities like chalk art can generate complaints from the small percentage of residents who prefer corporate sterility to human expression. Management companies have learned that it's easier to eliminate activities that might generate any complaints rather than defend residents' rights to normal family activities. This creates a system where the least tolerant members of a community effectively control what activities are permitted for everyone else. Third, chalk art and similar creative expressions represent unpredictability and individual initiative that can't be easily regulated through standardized corporate policies. Management companies prefer communities where all activities are predictable, controlled, and profitable, rather than spontaneous expressions of human creativity that might inspire other residents to think independently about community life. Tacky. Classification of chalk art as tacky reveals the aesthetic authoritarianism that defines corporate neighborhood control. Beauty becomes whatever corporate managers and complaining neighbors decide it should be, rather than something that emerges naturally from human creativity and community engagement. Children's innocent artwork is subjected to the same arbitrary, aesthetic judgments that are applied to major construction projects, treating a toddler's chalk flowers as if they were permanent modifications to community property. The 10 p.m. washing requirement imposed on Mackenzie isn't really about maintaining community standards. It's about demonstrating corporate authority over human expression and forcing residents to participate in the destruction of their own creativity as a show of submission to HOA control. The psychological impact of being forced to wash away beautiful artwork every night creates exactly the kind of demoralization that makes residents less likely to challenge corporate authority in other areas. Management companies understand that controlling small, seemingly insignificant activities like chalk art establishes precedents for controlling larger aspects of residents' lives. If an HOA can ban temporary chalk art that harms no one and benefits everyone, they can ban virtually any form of human expression or community engagement that doesn't serve corporate interests. The chalk art restrictions are testing grounds for how much control residents will accept before pushing back. The economic incentives driving these restrictions are equally revealing. Management companies profit from violation generation, administrative processes, and the general atmosphere of surveillance and control that keeps residents fearful of expressing themselves freely. Happy, confident residents who create community. Connections through activities like chalk art are less likely to accept arbitrary authority and more likely to question management decisions that don't serve community interests. The systematic elimination of joy from HOA communities isn't an accident or unintended consequence. It's a deliberate strategy for maintaining corporate control over neighborhoods that were originally designed to be self-governing communities where neighbors help each other and children can grow up with freedom to express their creativity safely. Mackenzie's persecution for chalk art reveals a darker truth about modern HOA governance: the transformation of American neighborhoods into surveillance states where mothers and children are monitored, reported on, and punished for activities that previous generations would have celebrated as examples of healthy family life and community engagement. The speed with which her art was discovered, reported, and restricted demonstrates a level of neighborhood surveillance that would make authoritarian governments proud. Consider the timeline of events that led to Mackenzie's HOA persecution. She began her daily chalk art routine, and within just 5 days, someone had not only noticed the artwork, but taken the time to file a formal complaint with the HOA describing it as tacky and demanding its elimination. This rapid response reveals that her neighborhood operates under a level of surveillance and social control where normal family activities are being constantly monitored by residents who view themselves as enforcement agents for corporate management. The neighbor who filed the complaint against Mackenzie's chalk art had to actively choose to transform a beautiful family activity into a corporate case file. They had to look at drawings of sea creatures and flowers, read inspirational messages designed to spread kindness, observe a mother bonding with her 2-year-old child through creative expression, and decide that this outbreak of joy was so offensive that it required official intervention to stop. This mindset reveals how completely corporate control has poisoned community relationships. The HOA's immediate acceptance of the complaint without investigation, consideration of community benefit, or recognition of the temporary nature of chalk art demonstrates how these organizations function as enforcement mechanisms rather than community representatives. There was no attempt to mediate between the complaining neighbor and Mackenzie, no consideration of the positive impact her art was having on other community members, and no recognition that chalk art is a normal childhood activity that enhances, rather than threatens neighborhood quality. The surveillance mechanism that enables this rapid reporting and response operates through a network of residents who have been transformed from neighbors into corporate monitoring agents. HOA communities create systems where people are encouraged to watch each other's activities and report anything that might violate corporate standards, rather than talking directly to each other about concerns or appreciating the diversity of activities that make communities vibrant and interesting. This neighborhood surveillance system particularly targets activities involving children and families, since these represent the kind of unpredictable human behavior that corporate management finds most difficult to control. Children playing, families creating art, neighbors helping each other, and spontaneous community activities all represent threats to the sterile predictability that management companies prefer. The surveillance state ensures that any outbreak of natural human behavior is quickly identified and suppressed. The psychological impact of living under this constant surveillance cannot be overstated. Families like Mackenzie's learn that their normal activities are being watched and judged by anonymous neighbors who have the power to trigger corporate punishment for any behavior they personally dislike. Children grow up understanding that their creativity and play are subject to surveillance and restriction by entities that prioritize control over human development. The reporting mechanism itself reveals how corporate control corrupts community relationships. Instead of neighbors talking to each other about concerns, residents are encouraged to file official complaints that trigger formal enforcement processes. This eliminates the human connection and problem-solving that should characterize healthy communities, replacing it with corporate bureaucracy that treats every interaction as a potential violation requiring punishment. Most disturbing is how this surveillance state specifically targets positive community activities while ignoring genuine problems. Mackenzie's beautiful, inspiring chalk art triggered immediate corporate intervention, but many HOA communities ignore serious issues like neglected properties, dangerous driving, or anti-social behavior that actually affects community safety and welfare. The surveillance apparatus is designed to control normal human expression rather than address legitimate community problems. The complaint filed against Mackenzie's chalk art represents something far more sinister than one neighbor's aesthetic preferences. It reveals how HOA systems systematically transform community members from neighbors who support each other into corporate enforcement agents who monitor and report on each other's normal human activities. This transformation of social relationships is one of the most damaging aspects of corporate neighborhood control and explains why communities that should be sources of mutual support become sources of stress, conflict, and surveillance. In healthy communities, neighbors who had concerns about chalk art would simply talk to Mackenzie directly, perhaps complimenting her creativity while mentioning any specific concerns they might have. Normal human interaction would involve conversation, understanding, and mutual problem-solving that strengthens community bonds rather than creates conflict. The fact that someone chose to bypass all human interaction and go directly to corporate authorities reveals how completely HOA systems have poisoned normal neighborly relationships. The anonymity of HOA complaint systems enables the worst aspects of human nature while eliminating the accountability that comes with face-to-face community interaction. The neighbor who reported Mackenzie's art as tacky didn't have to look her in the eye, explain their reasoning, or consider the impact of their complaint on a mother trying to create positive experiences for her young child. They could destroy someone's joy while remaining completely anonymous and unaccountable for the consequences of their action. This system creates communities where people are encouraged to view their neighbors' activities through the lens of corporate compliance rather than human benefit. Instead of appreciating Mackenzie's creativity and the joy her art brings to children and morning walkers, the complaining neighbor evaluated her activity solely based on whether it conformed to their personal aesthetic preferences and corporate regulations. This mindset eliminates empathy and community connection from neighborhood relationships. The HOA complaint system functions as a mechanism for enabling antisocial behavior while providing official legitimacy for personal grievances. People who might hesitate to directly confront neighbors about minor issues, feel empowered to file formal complaints that trigger corporate punishment processes. This transforms petty personal preferences into official violations that can affect families' housing security and financial well-being. The psychological profile of neighbors who report positive community activities like chalk art reveals troubling patterns of authoritarianism and social control that corporate systems enable and amplify. These individuals are often people who feel powerless in other areas of their lives and use HOA complaint mechanisms to exercise authority over their neighbors in ways that would be impossible in normal social relationships. The corporate structure provides them with power they couldn't obtain through normal community engagement. The broader impact of this neighbor-against-neighbor surveillance extends far beyond individual complaint incidents. Families like Mackenzie's learn that they must constantly consider how their normal activities might be perceived by anonymous neighbors who have the power to trigger corporate punishment. This creates a climate of self-censorship and fear that eliminates the spontaneity and creativity that make communities livable and interesting. Children growing up in these surveillance communities learn that neighbors are potential threats rather than sources of support, that their activities are subject to monitoring by adults who don't know them but have power over their families, and that corporate authority matters more than human relationships in determining what behaviors are acceptable in their own neighborhoods. The economic incentives built into HOA complaint systems encourage this destructive dynamic. Management companies profit from processing complaints, investigating violations, and administering punishment systems that generate fees and demonstrate their value to HOA boards. They have no financial incentive to promote community harmony or resolve conflicts through human interaction rather than corporate enforcement. Most tragically, the transformation of neighbors into corporate enforcement agents eliminates the natural community support systems that help families thrive. Instead of Mackenzie receiving encouragement and appreciation for her creativity, she faced official punishment from the very community where she was trying to spread joy and positive connections. While the HOA's attack on Mackenzie's chalk art reveals everything wrong with corporate neighborhood control, her response and the community support she's received prove that human creativity, determination, and kindness cannot be permanently suppressed by administrative bureaucracy and neighbor surveillance. Her decision to continue creating daily art despite corporate restrictions represents a form of peaceful resistance that should inspire everyone facing arbitrary authority in their own communities. Mackenzie's brilliant solution to HOA oppression demonstrates the kind of creative problem-solving that tyrants throughout history have never been able to defeat. Faced with a demand to wash away her artwork every night, she simply decided to create new art every morning, turning corporate restriction into an opportunity for even greater creative output and community engagement. What was intended to discourage? Her artistic expression instead became fuel for a more ambitious and meaningful project. The daily recreation of chalk art has transformed what began as a simple family activity into a powerful statement about values, priorities, and the kind of community Mackenzie wants her children to inherit. Each morning's artwork is now not just creative expression, but active resistance to the corporate forces trying to eliminate joy and spontaneity from neighborhood life. She's teaching her 2-year-old son that creativity matters enough to fight for, and that corporate authority shouldn't be allowed to crush human expression. The physical demands of the daily routine reveal the depth of Mackenzie's commitment to preserving creativity in the face of corporate oppression. The early mornings are difficult, especially during Alabama's hot summers, but her combination of stubbornness, spite, and genuine joy provides the motivation needed to sustain what has become a form of artistic civil disobedience. She's demonstrating that people willing to make personal sacrifices can resist corporate control even when formal legal challenges aren't available or affordable. The overwhelmingly positive community response to Mackenzie's story proves that most people understand the difference between legitimate community standards and arbitrary corporate control over normal human activities. The neighbors who have provided chalk, knee pads, cushions, and sweet notes recognize that her fight represents everyone's fight to preserve community spirit against entities that prioritize compliance over human welfare. The viral spread of Mackenzie's story through social media demonstrates how individual acts of resistance can inspire broader movements of people who refuse to accept corporate control over their daily lives. Parents across the country have shared her videos, started their own chalk art projects, and used her example to push back against similar restrictions in their own communities. Her personal resistance has become a catalyst for others facing comparable corporate oppression. The contrast between the anonymous neighbor who complained about Mackenzie's art and the many neighbors who support her creativity reveals an important truth about community dynamics under corporate control. While corporate systems amplify the voices of complainers and give them disproportionate power over community life, the actual majority of residents often support the activities being restricted. Mackenzie's experience shows that one person's complaint doesn't represent community sentiment, despite corporate management treating it as if it does. The sustainability of Mackenzie's resistance strategy provides hope for other families facing similar corporate restrictions. By turning compliance demands into opportunities for greater creative expression, she's shown that determined individuals can maintain their values and activities even under systems designed to eliminate them. Her approach requires persistence and early mornings, but it allows her family to continue the activity that brings them joy while technically complying with corporate restrictions. Most importantly, Mackenzie's resistance preserves the positive community impact that her original chalk art was designed to create. Neighbors still get to see beautiful, inspiring artwork on their morning walks. Children still witness creativity and positive messages in their neighborhood. The community benefits from her artistic contributions, despite the HOA's attempt to eliminate them through bureaucratic harassment. Mackenzie's chalk art battle represents the most fundamental choice facing American communities today. Whether we will preserve the human creativity, spontaneity, and joy that make neighborhoods worth living in, or surrender to corporate control, systems that treat human expression as problems to be managed rather than assets to be celebrated. Her daily artistic resistance in an Alabama driveway has become a symbol of every family's fight to maintain humanity in communities increasingly controlled by entities that prioritize efficiency over human flourishing. The stakes of this choice extend far beyond chalk art or even HOA restrictions. At its core, this is about whether American children will grow up in communities where their creativity is celebrated or suppressed, where their innocent attempts to beautify their neighborhoods are encouraged or punished, and where family activities that bring joy to everyone are treated as valuable community assets or violations requiring corporate intervention. Every morning when Mackenzie and her 2-year-old son create their driveway art, they're making a statement about what they believe communities should be. Places where people support each other's creativity, where children's artistic expression is valued, where spreading positivity is considered beneficial rather than tacky, and where neighbors appreciate beauty regardless of whether it's been approved by corporate management. The anonymous neighbor who complained about Mackenzie's art represents a different vision of community life: sterile uniformity enforced through surveillance and corporate authority, aesthetic control that prioritizes individual preferences over community benefit, and the systematic elimination of activities that might generate any complaints regardless of their positive impact on neighborhood morale and children's development. The HOA's immediate response to restrict Mackenzie's art rather than defend a resident's right to normal family activities reveals which vision of community these corporate entities support. They chose complaint management over community building, individual aesthetic preferences over children's creative development, and corporate control over human expression. Their decision demonstrates that HOA systems are fundamentally designed to serve corporate efficiency rather than human flourishing. The broader implications of normalizing corporate control over activities like chalk art cannot be overstated. If management companies can restrict temporary, harmless, positive activities like children's sidewalk art, they can control virtually any form of human expression or community engagement that doesn't serve their interests. The precedent being, set in communities like Mackenzie's will determine whether future generations of American children grow up with freedom to express themselves creatively or under surveillance systems that monitor and restrict their normal developmental activities. The community support Mackenzie has received proves that most people understand what's at stake in this fight. The neighbors who provide supplies and encouragement, the online supporters who share her story, and the families inspired to start their own creative projects recognize that her resistance represents everyone's fight to preserve human values. In corporate-controlled environments, the economic dimension of this choice is equally important. Communities where creativity is celebrated, where children can play and create freely, and where neighbors support each other's positive activities are more desirable places to live and maintain higher property values than sterile environments, controlled by corporate surveillance and arbitrary restriction. Mackenzie's art enhances her community's livability and appeal, while the HOA's restrictions make it less attractive to families who value creativity and human expression. The psychological impact on children growing up under these different systems will shape the next generation's understanding of creativity, community, and authority. Children like Mackenzie's son, who see their artistic expression valued and protected, learn that creativity matters and that adults will fight to preserve it. Children who grow up under corporate restrictions that classify their innocent artwork as violations learn that their creativity is unwelcome and that corporate authority matters more than human expression. The long-term consequences of these childhood lessons extend far beyond individual families to the broader culture and democratic institutions that depend on citizens who believe in their right to express themselves freely and challenge authority when it becomes arbitrary or oppressive. Communities that suppress children's creativity today are raising future adults who may be less likely to question corporate or governmental overreach in other areas of their lives. Mackenzie's choice to continue creating despite corporate restrictions represents the kind of principled resistance that has always been necessary to preserve human rights against institutional pressure. Her willingness to wake up early every morning, to endure the physical discomfort of kneeling on concrete, and to risk escalating conflict with her HOA demonstrates the commitment required to maintain human values in systems designed to eliminate them. The viral spread of her story proves that Americans are hungry for examples of successful resistance to corporate overreach, and that individual acts of defiance can inspire broader movements of people willing to fight for their communities. Every parent who has started their own chalk art project, every neighbor who has defended creative expression in their community, and every viewer who has shared her story is participating in a larger movement to preserve human creativity against corporate control. Mackenzie's driveway chalk art is still there every morning, still bringing joy to neighbors on their morning walks, still proving that human creativity and determination can survive even in corporate-controlled communities designed to eliminate both. Her 2-year-old son still helps create the daily masterpieces, still learns that his artistic expression matters, and still experiences the joy of creating something beautiful that makes other people smile. The simple act of drawing sea creatures, flowers, and inspirational messages with colored chalk has become something much more powerful, a daily demonstration that corporate authority cannot crush human creativity when people are determined to preserve it. Every morning when Mackenzie wheels out her supplies and begins creating, she's making a statement about values, priorities, and the kind of community she wants her children to inherit. The neighbor who complained about her art as tacky has inadvertently created something beautiful and inspiring by triggering Mackenzie's creative resistance. What was intended to eliminate joy from the community has instead generated more art, more community support, more inspiration, and more determination to preserve human expression against corporate control. The HOA's restriction requiring nightly washing of the artwork has backfired completely, transforming what might have been occasional chalk art into daily creative expression that reaches more people and generates more positive community impact than the original activity. Corporate attempts to suppress creativity have instead amplified it, proving that human determination can turn oppression into opportunity. The overwhelming community support Mackenzie has received, from neighbors providing supplies to strangers, sharing her story across social media, demonstrates that most Americans still believe in communities where children can express themselves freely and where spreading positivity is considered valuable rather than problematic. Her fight has revealed that corporate control doesn't represent community values, even when it claims to enforce community standards. The broader movement inspired by Mackenzie's resistance shows that individual acts of creative defiance can catalyze larger changes in how communities respond to corporate overreach. Parents across the country have started their own chalk art projects. Neighbors have begun defending creative expression in their communities, and HOA residents have found new courage to challenge arbitrary restrictions that serve corporate efficiency, rather than human flourishing. The daily routine continues because Mackenzie understands that this fight is about more than chalk art. It's about whether American children will grow up in communities that celebrate their creativity or suppress it, whether neighbors will support each other's joy or report it as violations, and whether human expression will be valued or treated as problems requiring corporate management. Every morning's artwork represents a choice between submission and resistance, between corporate compliance and human creativity, between communities. Designed to serve management companies and neighborhoods built to support families. Mackenzie has chosen resistance, creativity, and community support over submission to corporate authority. The chalk is still colorful. The messages are still inspiring. The community support continues growing. The corporate restrictions remain in place, but they have been transformed from tools of suppression into catalysts for greater creative expression and community solidarity. Most importantly, Mackenzie's 2-year-old son is learning that creativity matters enough to fight for, that corporate authority shouldn't determine what families can do together, and that determined people can preserve human values even in systems designed to eliminate them. These lessons will shape his understanding of creativity, community, and resistance for the rest of his life. Subscribe to support Mackenzie and other families fighting for creative freedom. Share this story with every parent who believes. Children deserve communities that celebrate rather than suppress their artistic expression. Comment: would you support Mackenzie if she lived in your community? Has your HOA restricted normal family activities? Your voice matters in this fight for creative freedom. Like this video if Mackenzie's creative resistance inspires you. Share with everyone who believes communities should support rather than suppress human creativity and joy.